Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. So, patch 0.9.2 has hit. Has everybody memorised all of the cruiser armour plating changes? Everyone gotten fully to grips with the nerfed IFHE skill and completely understands which cruisers and destroyers are going to benefit from it and which ones aren't? No, me neither. So let's just forget all of that and have a battleship replay. Hang on a minute, what's going on here? This is Daan like a boss in the French Tier 6 premium battleship, the Dunkirk, or as I like to call it, the Dunker Q, because mispronouncing the names of French ships never gets old. And Daan is doing something that I've never actually seen somebody do in a battle before. He's activating the free camera. You might have seen this in replays, but you might not have realised that you can actually do it during battle as well. It doesn't really give you any benefit because you can't use it to see anything that you wouldn't have been able to see anyway. But check this out when he briefly focuses on this emerald. Do you see how jerky the emerald's animation is? So you don't notice that when it's 3 kilometers away from you, but you do notice when it's 3 kilometers away and you zoom right up to it. That's the game saving on animation cycles that it doesn't need to render because something's far away from the camera. Works surprisingly well until you move the camera closer than it should be. Ah, right, Dan's gotten back to business. Shots out at the enemy Devonshire and he's coming under air attack from the Hosho. That's going to be a rough game for the Hosho. Tier 4 aircraft, this is a Tier 6 battle cruiser. And overlapping fields of anti-aircraft fire. It's going to be a very rough game for the enemy Hosho, particularly if he keeps attacking targets like that. Then again, looking at the map, pretty much everybody has mutually overlapping concentric rings of anti-aircraft firepower this early, so Hosho would probably have been better off not committing the aircraft to an attack and instead just using them to spot until a likely target became available. But he didn't, and so he's lost that squadron. Not to worry though, the magical, mystical aircraft production fairies in his hangar will soon work their magic and produce fresh aircraft from their arses before too long. Oh, looks like Dan scored some hits on that Devonshire from earlier. I wasn't actually paying attention. But just under 3,000 damage, probably overpens. Yeah, again, some fairly disappointing results thus far. The thing about the real Dunker Q was that it was actually quite inaccurate by battleship standards. And that was really a consequence of having 4 guns per turret, whereas most other battleships of the time only had 2 guns per turret, or at the most squeezed 3 guns in per turret, but the Dunker Q had 4, which means that each set of guns, the 2 on the left and the 2 on the right, if the guns were fired at the same time, the shells, as they left the barrels, were so close to each other that the shock waves produced by the shells as they punched their way through the air would actually force the shells apart, hence inaccurate at longer ranges. He's screwing around with that free camera again, isn't he? Although I do like what he's doing here, taking cover behind the island. Because look at the Hawkins over there. Not taking cover behind, well, anything. In this position, there are potentially 7 enemy ships that could be shooting at him. But because he's got the island there, well, there's still a lot of ships that could be shooting at him, although they're not, because there's a far better target, the Hawkins. But I do like that he's actually thinking about cover and using what's available. By the way, while we're still on the subject of the Dunker Q, the turret arrangement, which is kind of unusual, although not by French battleship standards, just unusual by everybody else's battleship standards, but it did have one benefit that you don't get in World of Warships. If the turret armour gets hit by a shell and penetrated, you lose the turret and all 4 guns, but that wouldn't have happened to the actual Dunker Q, because the turrets were compartmentalised, and it really was like having 2 turrets in one, with 2 sets of 2 guns. So if the turret was penetrated, you'd lose 2 guns, but you wouldn't lose all 4. The other 2 would still be able to continue firing. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in World of Warships, which is a bit of a bummer, because the Dunkerque, in common with other French battleships, has all of its eggs in 2 baskets. All of those guns in 2 turrets means if you lose 1 turret, and the turrets aren't that difficult to disable, you've just lost 50% of your firepower, when in actuality, if this ship had suffered that kind of damage, it would have only lost 2 of the guns from 1 of the turrets. And all of the crew in the other gun compartment in the same turret would have lost their hearing. Which isn't nice, but I'm sure you'll agree is infinitely preferable to losing all of their arms, legs and heads. So, while Dan is doing his best impression of the USS Atlanta and making this island his waifu, let's just take a quick look at the map and see what's happening. The central cap is still up for grabs, unsurprisingly. The Hawkins, a heavy cruiser, couldn't cap it undetected, something that, well, with a carrier in play, even a destroyer would have struggled to do without being spotted. A pair of British heavy cruisers and an Emerald have taken capture point Charlie over to the east and are now pushing north and trying to get some flanking fire into those enemy ships up to the north. Over to the west, capture point Alpha is busy seesawing between Dan's team and the enemy team. Originally, the enemy team had 2 cruisers in there and were capping it, but those 2 have now been sunk, along with the enemy destroyer. Emboldened by this sudden success, the cruisers on Dan's team are trying to push into capture point Alpha, and now they're being sunk by the enemy ships to the north. Meanwhile, Dan just keeps exchanging fire with the Piotr Veliki over there, but he's not really doing a huge amount of damage to him. Then again, the Piotr Veliki isn't really doing a huge amount of damage to Dan either. Dan does have a bit of an advantage here, because all of his guns are in the front, so he doesn't have to turn and give broadside in order to get all of the guns firing. Annoyingly, the Piotr Veliki does have to turn and give broadside to get all of the guns firing, and is turning and giving broadside, but, well, the long-range inaccuracy of the Dunkirk is proving to be, how can we put this, more than a little frustrating. We're seeing shots landing to the left, to the right, they're dropping short, they're going long, absolutely anything but hitting the target. Come on then, Dan, throw enough shit at the wall. Oh yes! That's more like it. Eventually some of it stuck. It's just a matter of time. The target's giving you a broadside like that to shoot at. Eventually, you're going to cause them significant pain and grief. Is he going to get the guns reloaded again in time? He should. He has. That's the other good thing about the Dunkerque. They're not the largest caliber guns. Oh, and another Citadel. So the reload is actually not too bad on these things. Is he going to keep going so Dan can finish him off? That's what we want to know. He is. Ooh, come on, Dan. Oh, I think that's just a little bit too much lead. Although the consistency of those shots was pretty good for a change, but not quite enough to finish off the Piotr Veliki. Meanwhile, Dan is pushing forward, abandoning his waifu island, because his attention, I think, has just been grabbed by the startling lack of success of the 3 cruisers that pushed north from capture point Charlie. They're all dead. Dan commits the classic schoolboy error of assuming that his teammates can finish off that crippled Russian battleship, possibly distracted by the message appearing in battle chat that a Piotr Veliki had just died. And the Piotr Veliki did just die, but it wasn't that one, it was one of the ones on Dan's team. The enemy Piotr Veliki was down to 450 health, and he's now survived long enough that he's able to actually start getting some heals underway. So Dan, if you want a job doing properly, you're pretty much going to have to do it yourself. And while that guy was entirely happy to give broadside when he had 50,000 health, he's not so keen to do it now. And, well, once again, the legendary inaccuracy of the Dunkirk's guns allows the Piotr Veliki to survive long enough to get further shots off and further healing done. This is a bit of a problem, because the longer it takes him to deal with that Piotr Veliki, the more this Graf Spee is going to farm him. And Dan was tempted to switch fire and shoot at the Graf Spee because he was given a lovely broadside to shoot at, but, well, the Piotr Veliki is an easier kill, and now he's giving broadside too. Possibly influenced by the friendly torpedo attack coming in from the stern, but hey, whatever the reason, we'll take it. He's dead, and Dan isn't. He's burning quite merrily though. That Graf Spee has definitely been taken advantage. Although I'm not quite sure why the Graf Spee wasn't firing armour piercing. I mean, he's got big guns, And this is a French battleship. It's not particularly well armoured. Technically, the Dunkirk was more of a battle cruiser than a battleship, but don't tell the French that. They'll get upset. And again, choices, choices. Which target to shoot at? Well, they're both technically cruisers. Could this be a kill? It is! Definitely the right choice. Always reduce the number of guns shooting back at you wherever possible. Now, what's the Graf Spee up to? Well, he probably fancies his chances because he's tier 6. He's got big, arguably battleship caliber guns. They're not that much smaller than the guns on the Dunkirk. And he has torpedoes. Torpedoes with very, very nice, almost frontal firing arcs and an 8-kilometer range. And that means, Dan, and I'm just saying, you are already inside his torpedo range and you don't have hydroacoustic search. And oh, it's almost as if he heard me. He's changing course. You don't have to see the torpedoes to be able to know that they're on the way. He's turning in towards him, changing his course. Now the Graf Spee has 2 torpedo launchers, and they each fire 4 torpedoes. He's nosing in. That's actually quite smart. And I think that's both sets of torpedoes. So he must have fired the first set when Dan was outside of torpedo range. Dan, what are you doing? Dan, why are you giving broadside to the Graf Spee? Dan, it's got 283mm guns. Ah, it's the Hosho's torpedo bombers. That's why he was turning, although kind of late. And he did eat both of the torpedoes, but they're only tier 4 airdrop torpedoes. They don't do a huge amount of damage. What is doing a huge amount of damage is the Graf Spee secondaries. Graf Spee doesn't have a huge amount of secondaries, but 8 of them are 150mm guns, and with the quarter caliber penetration rule, those secondaries can penetrate Dan's armour. And at this kind of range, it's very difficult for them to miss. The problem with the Dunkirk, of course, is that all of the guns are in the front. So when there's a target behind you, well, the firing arcs are pretty good. You don't have to expose that much broadside in order to hit the target behind you, even if when you do hit, all of your armour-piercing shells over-penetrate. But at that kind of range, Graf Spee's 283mm guns can quite easily, if he was firing anything other than high explosive, penetrate the armour of a Dunkirk. But he wasn't firing anything other than high explosive. So Dan survives that fight as well. Although only just, and no, I have no idea whether Graf Spee popped his hydroacoustic search towards the end of that battle. Perhaps he was expecting Dan to torpedo him. Well, I don't know. I mean, anything's possible. Well, Dan's on very low health, and of the 2 enemy ships that flipped Charlie, the Montecuccoli has just appeared down to the south. But of slightly more pressing concern is the Britannia, who's just popped up to the north. Now, Dan is definitely going to want to get out of line of fire of this guy. He's got a minute to go before he can get heels underway. Unfortunately, in order to get out of line of fire, he has to turn into the island and ow, 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 oh, ow, ow. And that, of course, means giving a big fat juicy target for that rival French battleship to shoot at 495 health. Luckily, the Montecuccoli down to the south has an island in the way and can't be spamming him with semi-armour piercing as well. I mean, I say luckily. I really don't think there was anything lucky about it. Dan did check the position of the Italian heavy cruiser to the south. He knows, there he goes again, that he's safe from fire from him. But now he just has to hang on for a few more seconds. He can get a heel underway, and he's slowing quite deliberately in order to ensure that that heel has some time to take effect before he has to fight this other French battle wagon. Checking the position of any other enemies. And looking at the map, it looks like that fella's turning around. Okay, the heels are underway. Dan starts speeding up again. So how many times have you seen a couple of battleships coming around the corner of an island to fight each other, and they both come around the corner broadside on and start laying into each other? Remember, the Dunkirk doesn't need to do that. All of the guns are in the front. Just give a little bit of angling, make the most of your armour, and let the enemy make the mistake. His heels are complete. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Comes around the corner, broadside on, and just to add insult to injury, His guns weren't even pointing in the right direction. There's kill number 4. There are now just 2 enemy ships left, the Monty down to the south, and presumably somewhere to the north, the enemy carrier. Which is kind of surprising. I mean, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the battle as a whole that's been going on around Daan, but the enemy team have done a fantastic job of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, because when Daan was fighting the Piotr Veliki earlier, the enemy team had only lost 3 ships, and Daan's team were down 5 cruisers and a battleship. So, Daan, what are you going to do now? Because the game isn't over. Now, he's heading in the direction of Charlie. I think he's doing this for 2 reasons, because 1, cornering the island here is going to give him the opportunity to get some shots in against the enemy Monty down to the south, although he's probably only going to get 1 salvo. And you know what the Dunker Q's guns are like at long range. And yeah, that was pretty terrible. Heading this way has given him more than 1 option though, because while he doesn't have any further shots at the Monty down to the south, heading in this direction is taking him in the direction of Cap Circle Charlie, which is currently under enemy control, and if he can flip that, that's all kinds of credits and experience. But hang on a second. Looks like the Monty is steaming. Oh, wow. Friendly ships all rushing forward as quickly as they can to see who can get killed first by the last surviving enemy cruiser. Oh, Dan might actually have a shot here. Slowing down. No. Right. 1 enemy ship left, the Hosho. No idea where it is. Looks like Dan's going to have to go for plan B after all, and liberate Capture Point Charlie from the evil clutches of the enemy team. And so, Dan was quite content to do just that. Capping in a battleship. Yeah. Hey, why not? If you can, go for it. I'm sure he'd have been much happier to get the 5th kill on the Kraken Unleashed award, but, well, capping isn't nothing. Shortly afterward, Dan is still screwing around with the free camera, incidentally, in the process, showing us just exactly how much work Wargaming are going to have to do to these maps before they even think about putting submarines in, when, out of nowhere, the Hosho pops up on the map. Dan. Dan! Dan, I said the Hosho just appeared. Dan, your 5th kill. Well, I say the Hosho appeared out of nowhere. The Texas found him. Just let the implications of that one sink in for a second. Not the Graf Spee, not the fast Deutschland-class commerce-raiding heavy cruiser / pocket battleship, not the Dunkirk, not the class of French battleship built to catch and sink the Deutschland-class cruisers. No, the Texas, top speed 20.5 knots. He found the Hosho. Bit of a good news, bad news situation for the Hosho, because the Texas's AA is best in tier, and he's 2 tiers higher than the Hosho. Good news, the Fubuki decided to close to within secondary gun battery range when he had less than 1,000 health. And of course, good news for Dan as well, because he's finally in shooting range of the last ship alive on the enemy team, and that means kill number 5, Kraken Unleashed, and high caliber. Thanks, Dan. Congratulations on the result. Most unexpected, I'm sure. And hopefully you all enjoyed something that wasn't the usual bunch of tier 10s zipping around the place and blowing each other to smithereens while trying as hard as possible to throw the match in the process. That's it for today, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.